Thank you, Rex, and I'm delighted to be again with the Delta Caucus. You know the campaign lasts too long when you've been at this caucus meeting 3 times during the campaign. But I am delighted to be here again, and of course, reflecting back, I was one of the original co-sponsors of the Delta Regional Authority. I'm delighted that this caucus supports economic development in the Delta region, not just in Arkansas, but across the multiple states. And so welcome, and I'm delighted to participate with you. I look at Arkansas as a small state, and partnerships are critical for economic development. And your work is a critical partner and link with the state of Arkansas. We need to be working together. We need to be going the same direction and having many of the same priorities. My passion is economic development and growth. I look at the challenges that we face in the Delta, and there's really not any challenge that cannot be addressed by economic growth in our region. If the challenge is education, economic growth will help us to increase our tax base. If you're looking at the challenge in healthcare or people dependent upon welfare, economic development addresses each of those. If you look at I-69 and you look at the challenge that we face in our infrastructure, economic development and growth for our state addresses all of those problems. So my passion is job growth and economic development. And how do you get there? One, we need to do some things structurally different in Arkansas. That's why I advocate for a reduction of our state income tax rate. And let me emphasize the rate part of it, because we've got to get the rate down to be competitive with Mississippi, with Missouri, who just lowered their income tax rate again, with Tennessee and surrounding states. Secondly, we need to concentrate on job skill education and not simply just the college preparatory work in high school. And we've laid out a plan to address the job skills partnership that we need with industry and with our 2-year colleges and with our high schools as well, making it a seamless approach that leads to a job. I've emphasized computer sciences, and it's necessary to be offered in every high school in Arkansas within 4 years. And I'm not speaking of simply the ability to do Microsoft Word. I'm speaking of the ability to write the language of the computer in computer coding. And can you imagine if we graduate 10,000 high schoolers that over the next few years that know how to write computer code, and how that would change the dynamics of Arkansas? And a young person in Forest City graduating from high school with the ability to write computer code, getting more education, being an entrepreneur, and with access to high-speed internet could be the next Bill Gates that creates jobs in the Delta region. Those are opportunities that should not be denied anyone in Arkansas. And so these are some of the things I'm talking about in the campaign. I look forward to the questions you might have, Rex. If you don't have any, I'll continue talking.
We've got plenty, believe me. Governor Beebe spoke yesterday. I'll get right to it, and gave a very strong address on his feeling on the need to keep the private option alive. As governor, would you support the private option? Obviously, there's a deep split among legislators in your own party on that issue.
Well, when you look at the private option, we're learning a great deal as we continue on. And I want to give you some historical context to this as to how we got into this debate. And secondly, some perspectives that I have on the private option. I noted that the governor was optimistic in terms of the private option for the future. I will tell you that I'm optimistic that our legislators in our state will do the right thing with the 150,000 that have enrolled in the private option. We'll do the right thing in terms of making the adjustments that are needed to reflect the values of Arkansas, and to make sure that this program is an incentive for people to work and not an incentive for people not to work, which is a quality and a value that I bring to every program that we have. And then we have to evaluate it long term as to whether it is affordable and will do the right thing with the people of Arkansas. How did we get into this position? There were 4 parts to the Affordable Care Act. There was the individual mandate that said everybody had to buy insurance. There was the employer mandate that said every large company had to offer insurance, and there third part was the insurance exchange. That was for the middle income people to have some of it subsidized and have it easier for them to acquire insurance off the exchange. The fourth part was the Medicaid expansion. And there were many, in fact 35 states I believe it was, that filed a lawsuit, challenged its constitutionality. They didn't like the whole thing. And I'll tell you, I was in that category. I was opposed to the Affordable Care Act. And it was challenged in court, and I wanted Arkansas to join in that challenge. But what did the Supreme Court do? Instead of striking down the individual mandate that I thought was a violation of freedom, in terms, they didn't strike down the employer mandate because it violated the Commerce Clause. They didn't strike down the exchanges. They upheld all three of those parts of it, and the only thing they struck down was the Medicaid expansion. And so that left all of the political fuel going toward the Medicaid expansion, the private option debate. And the result is that we have a debate on whether we're going to extend insurance coverage for the working poor. And so it's mandated, if we did away with the private option, what does that leave you? It says we're going to subsidize middle income folks, but we're going to leave the working poor out of the equation. And so that puts us in a quandary in Arkansas, and I just put that in perspective, and that's why there was a divide among our Republican legislators. There was trying to put a context of some conservative principles to work that resulted in the private option. Now, that's the historical perspective. What have we learned with the private option? 150,000 people have gained health care. It's certainly been good for our rural hospitals. They've reduced the indigent care, unreimbursed indigent care. But we've also learned some things that I've learned in the campaign trail. We have shifted charitable care to government care. And you go across Arkansas and the Christian or the faith-based or the charitable care that doctors are providing through healthcare clinics free of charge to indigents, they no longer have a mission because that charitable care has been shifted to the government. And so, and Hot Springs is a good example of that. I was in Morrilton. Morrilton is a good example of it. That's all across the state. And so they've lost the mission. I would like to see those charitable missions brought back together and say, how can we renew a mission and redefine it so we don't lose that asset in our state of charitable giving for medical care as we continue to evaluate the private option. Our Kids Medicaid, the Our Kids program that Governor Huckabee and many others championed, provided Medicaid expansion really for our children to make sure they're adequately covered. Well, with the Medicaid expansion, the Our Kids program was shifted over into the private option where they got a Blue Cross Blue Shield or some other private insurance policy. But we're learning that that's a shift in coverage. And so what was covered under Our Kids might not be covered under the private insurance policy. I talked to some court advocates for juveniles, and they said you don't have the same level of psychological testing and psychological treatment under the private insurance policy that you did have under the old Medicaid expansion under the Our Kids. And so these are things that we're learning. We're going to be learning something every day about our new experiment with this private option, how it's working, the cost of it, the premiums of it, the consequence to private providers, including charitable providers. And we need to, one, see how the elections come out in November. We need to count the votes, and we need to work together to come up with the best solution based upon some of the values that I have articulated. I pledge to you this, that I will work in a bipartisan way with Democrats and Republicans to figure out the right solution that is unique for our state to make sure that we can advance health care in Arkansas, but also make sure that it's affordable for our state's future.
I'd like to follow up quickly that we had a very good bipartisan exchange between Senator Sanders and Governor Beebe yesterday. Unfortunately, based in Washington, D.C., you never see Steve Banner and President Obama engage in a pleasant bipartisan exchange on key issues. So I just thought I'd mention that. We appreciate your comments about bipartisanship. Then I'll move on. In the Delta, most of our partners see education as a key to a brighter future for our region, but our pre-K to 12 programs lag way behind, and we have a low number college graduates. How would you address those issues? And in particular, we'd like to ask, in light of the fact that one of the key things for this conference has to be we'd like to issue views on Mike Ross's proposal to expand the pre-K program to make it accessible for all 40-year schools in the state by 2025. And is this a beneficial program, and how will it be funded?
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, my opponent in this race, former Congressman Mike Ross, came out with a proposal to expand pre-kindergarten to make it accessible for every family in Arkansas who makes below 300% of poverty, or $59,000 round numbers every year for a family of three. Now let's think about this for a second. Our current program is that we will provide taxpayer support for pre-K education for those that are up to 200% of poverty. But we are not funding that program yet. So my position is, why would we want to create a new government program when we're not funding the existing program? And Governor Beebe, as committed as he is to early childhood education, was not able in this last legislative session to generate the funds to even adequately fund our existing program up to 200% of poverty. So I oppose creating a new program and expanding a program and benefiting those that are making up to $59,000 a year to provide free taxpayer-funded pre-K education for everybody that make up to $59,000 a year. And his plan goes beyond that to subsidizes those that are making up to 400% of poverty level. And so no, I think it's the wrong direction for us. There's a lot better ways to use that money. And I think we need to concentrate on our pre-K program right now that is not adequately funded, and that is my commitment. So I support pre-K. I just don't want to offer the voters something that is not the right direction for Arkansas in terms of the use of our taxpayers' dollars. But let me add, when I'm talking about education, I'm specific about Mr. Ross's plan, but there's things that I think that we need to do in partnership to address the challenge in education and job creation. And one thing that's not on your list of questions that I think is very important is to address the problem of crime in Arkansas. And you've got to first recognize that it is a problem in Arkansas, and that's not on your list. And I think that it should be included in the challenges that we face in the Delta. And so I have advocated, and a couple of weeks ago presented my plan to address crime problems in Arkansas that include $1 million that would be devoted to drug treatment courts that helps those that have an addiction problem, but also a crime problem, to get the treatment that they need with accountability. Secondly, we need to have more effective reentry programs for those that come out of prison and want to get a job. That is economic development in the Delta. Whenever they pay their price, they need assistance to get a job and to re-enter society and to be tax-paying, productive citizens again. And so I want to devote $300,000 of state taxpayers' dollars to more effective re-entry programs for ex-offenders. I challenge this caucus to advocate with the Delta Regional Authority and others to match that funding for a successful re-entry program so that ex-offenders can get jobs as well. And that's what partnership is about to me. The state says this is a priority. It'll make a difference in job creation and getting people to work and economic development. You join in that partnership and we maximize that opportunity. So I challenge you to join that plan and devote some of the resources of the Delta Regional Authority to effective re-entry programs. There's more to the plan than what I've just outlined, but I want to bring my experience as a former federal prosecutor, as a former administrator of the DEA, to say we can do better in Arkansas in addressing the crime problem and making it a safer place to live, but also to make sure people have an opportunity to get back to work when they've paid their price to our society.
Let's move it back to education. I have a follow-up on that. There has been a lot of debate nationally over the Common Core standards. In some states, we've seen states pulling away from that. That actually was an outgrowth, as you know, from the National Governors Association, would you be supportive of Common Core standards in the state of Arkansas as governor?
I have a set of principles that I apply to education and educational standards in this state. First of all, I believe that as a principle, we should make sure education policy is dictated here in Arkansas and not dictated by Washington, D.C. And so y'all can join in that. The second principle is that we need to continue to have high standards in Arkansas. And so we want the highest standards for our children and to make sure that they are challenged to achieve. And that was one of the objectives of the Common Core standards, is to make sure we have not just standards that are comparable to other states, but also that we elevate our standards. And I want to make sure we continue to have high standards in education and high expectations for our young people. Within that, I hope we have some flexibility to our local school districts. Our state has a responsibility to maintain those high standards. And then, if you have a local school district, though, and they want to teach cursive writing in their public schools, I want to make sure they have the flexibility to do that. So those are some of the principles that I bring. When it comes to the Common Core, I pledge that we're going to have a review of that based upon those principles. We want to make sure we maintain the high standards, we keep the flexibility of our local school districts, and that I'm going to be listening to the teachers, I'm going to listen to parents. I think we did have some problems with implementation of that where we didn't really bring in all the stakeholders to have the buy-in on those new standards that we adopted. And so my education commissioner will take a fresh look at that based upon the standards that I outlined.